Hey everyone, what's going on? I hope you're all ready for a proper breakdown because Riot just dropped a huge update, patch 11.10, and it reshuffles a few things in ways that actually change how you'll think about site control, entry plays, and who you want on your team when the round starts. The thing I want you to keep in mind as I go through this is that Harbor didn't just get a tweak or two. His whole toolkit was rebuilt with the explicit goal of moving him from a passive water warden into something that can actively enable pushes and force fights. And Riot made some pretty targeted adjustments to Clove to tone down some of her more oppressive moments. If you'd asked me yesterday whether Harbor would ever be played like an initiator, I'd have laughed. But with the new abilities and the way they interact now, that's exactly where the conversation is headed. So, let's start with what actually changed for Harbor in plain English, because mechanics-only talk gets dull fast. Cove, which used to be a limited part of his kit, is now his signature ability. You place it, you can fine-tune the placement with a targeting hold, and crucially, you can reactivate it to turn that water smoke into a shield that actually blocks bullets until it's destroyed. That is huge because it gives Harbor the rare ability to create temporary, destroyable cover in mid-fight. It's not invulnerable, it's not permanent, but the timing windows on that shield are what'll make or break plays. High Tide, which a lot of players used as a creative zoning tool, got moved off the signature slot and now costs credits to use, so you'll have to be a bit choosier about when you drop it in a round. On top of those two, Riot added a new throwable called Storm Surge that creates a delayed whirlpool. It winds up, then nearsights and slows enemies inside it, and Reckoning his ultimate was refashioned into a forward surge that nearsights and slows targets it hits. All of this together flips Harbor into someone who can both cut off angles and literally make it harder for enemies to fight back when you're committing. Why does that matter for practical play? Imagine you're on an execute. Instead of just throwing a smoke and hoping for crossfires, you can put a cove where an entry would normally get punished, reactivate it so your teammate has a shielded angle to peek, and toss a Storm Surge into a choke to strip vision and movement speed from defenders trying to contest. Reckoning then becomes the tool you use to push rotations or trap flanks. This is not passivity. This is actively making a lane easier to take and literally creating moments where an enemy has to either burn a big piece of utility to remove your cover or take a fight while partially blinded and slowed. Teams that learn timing windows for shield activation and destruction and coordinate their flashes and molotovs around those windows will get massive value out of Harbor. It's a lot of new synergy to learn, but if you grind it, you can make otherwise tidy defensive holds feel chaotic. Let's be real though. Anytime an agent can create cover or delay peaks, counterplay shows up fast. Utilities that destroy or ignore the shield. Instant frag grenades, certain ultimates, long-range tools that keep you from leaning into the shield will be prioritized in team comps against Harbor. If you're on the receiving end, you either force the shield out early with explosives and utilities, or you pivot to long-range angles that make the shield less useful. That interaction is going to be the central mechanical chess match for a while. Can the Harbor player time shields and surges to chain with their team's entries, or do opponents just shred the shield and punish the predictable timings? The answer will change as the patch rolls on, but either way, expect a learning curve. Now, Clove, she got hit where it hurts for snowball potential. Ruse charges are now capped to 1 when Clove is dead, and the overheal from Pick Me Up was reduced from 100 to 50 HP. Translation: the ridiculous late round sustain and the ability to spam utility after getting downed are both dialed back. Clove won't just disappear as a viable pick, but she's less likely to be the thing keeping a team healthy enough to steamroll a comeback off of one big play. From a viewer perspective, this should lead to cleaner team fights and fewer seemingly impossible clutch recoveries that hinge entirely on overheal or post-death utility spam. For players, it means you should treat Clove fights like they're winnable once you land the initial trade. There's less built-in insurance now to bail out a bad peak. If you're making content around this update, and you are, since that's why you asked for a script, there are a few storytelling angles that land well. 1. Show how Cove shield timings look in a real round. A slow motion of the shield popping up, the opponent's utility being wasted, then the trade that follows. 2. Compare clutch scenarios pre and post nerf for Clove so your audience can visually see how the risk-reward shifted. And 3. Use a couple of quick scramble plays to demonstrate Storm Surge's near sight, slow and cramped chokes versus in open areas. The difference in impact is delicious for a viewer because it's immediate and tangible. Those kinds of visual contrasts are the difference between an informative video and a memorable one. Okay, strategy time, but without turning into a dry lecture. If you're on a fence and you've got Harbor, think of him as the teammate who makes risky angles playable for the next 3 seconds. Put Cove in spots where defenders will feel forced to either commit utility or give ground. Reactivate it just before your team assumes the angle, and then use Storm Surge to slow down any attempt at a counter peek. If you're defending and see a Harbor, diffuse his timing by baiting the shield or punishing it with long-range spam. Make the Harbor waste his high tide credits by counter-committing early, and aim to trade out the shield in the small window after it pops, because once it's gone, his burst potential takes a small dip. For Clove players, your play becomes more about timing and less about relying on guaranteed survival. You'll want to be more conservative with pick-me-up because it heals less now, and you can't bank on a bunch of roost charges turning the tide after you go down. What about pro play? I expect scrims to light up with Harbor testing. If he consistently clears space for entries without being trivially countered, you'll see him show up in specific maps or bomb sites where the smoke to shield geometry is crazy strong. But Riot also likes to watch stats. If Cove or Storm Surge performs too dominantly, quick balance patches aren't out of the question. For content creators, the pro scrim clips where Harbor enabled a textbook execute will be your gold. Break them down, show the timing, and then overlay how you'd replicate that in ranked. That's the sort of content that actually helps viewers improve while keeping them entertained. Before I wrap this up, there are a few QoL and competitive integrity touches in the patch you should know about. Riot's been tweaking the collections UI and rolling out some account security measures for high ranks in certain regions, which matters mainly to folks who live and breathe competitive ladder anxiety. There are also a ton of bug fixes in the notes, small but meaningful things like planting edge cases and UI polish, and those tend to make gameplay feel smoother even if they don't show up in highlight reels. If you want a line or two to close your video with, point out that this is one of those patches that looks like a slow meta rotation rather than a flip the switch moment. Harbor's potential is undeniable, but he's not guaranteed to dominate every game. And Clove is now less of a safety net for teams that relied on her to bail out bad rounds. Alright, if you're making this video, I'd suggest ending with a quick personal take. What you think the most underrated change is, and one specific setup you want viewers to try in their next 10 ranked games. That small actionable challenge at the end gets people to click back and tell you how it went, which is exactly the engagement you want. If you want, I can script that finishing challenge for you with exact timings and voiceover lines so it sounds natural on camera, or I can write a shorter gameplay overlay script showing the perfect Cove shield placement for Bind B, Ascent A, and Split Mid. Which of those do you want me to do next?